Part 1. The Making of a Fraud. The orc war boss towers 3 meters tall, all muscle, all tusks, all violence given form. Your last pistol feels like a toy. Behind you, 300 Valhallan soldiers watch their commissar face down this monster. They see courage. They see a hero. They see Commissar Ciaphas Cain, standing defiant against impossible odds. They don't see your knees shaking. They don't hear your heart trying to break free from your chest. They don't know that every fiber of your being screams one word: run. But you can't run. Not because you're brave, because running means a bolt shell in your skull, either from your own side or because fleeing exposes you as the fraud you are. So you stand there, last pistol raised, chainsword humming, wearing confidence like a mask while terror claws at your throat. The orc grins, tusks like combat knives. It charges. This is Ciaphas Cain, the greatest hero the Imperium never wanted, the commissar who stumbled into legend while desperately trying to save his own skin. Every attempt at self-preservation somehow turned into glorious victory, and nobody believes him when he tells the truth. They think it's humility. To understand Cain, you need to understand what a commissar is. These aren't soldiers, they're executioners in uniform, political officers embedded in Imperial Guard regiments with one job: keep troops fighting, or kill anyone who won't. Summary execution isn't just permitted, it's expected. A guardsman who falters can find a bolt shell through their brain before they finish the thought to retreat. Commissars are feared, hated, necessary. They wear black uniforms that stand out on any battlefield because they're expected to lead from the front, to be visible, to be the living proof that courage exists, even here, even now, even facing this. They carry bolt pistols for execution and chain swords for close combat. Everything about a commissar screams absolute confidence and unwavering faith. Most commissars embrace this role. They see themselves as the emperor's judgment made flesh. They cultivate ruthlessness. They study legends like Yarick, who stared down orc war bosses and made the greenskins believe his eyes could kill. They memorize inspirational speeches and execute cowards with mechanical efficiency. And then there's Cain, who desperately wishes he could live up to even a fraction of that reputation, while knowing he's just trying not to die. His story begins at the Schola Progenium, where orphans are forged into Imperial servants. These aren't schools, they're furnaces, children broken down and rebuilt into weapons. Cain never knew his parents. His earliest memories were drill instructors, shock batons when lessons failed, and the constant pressure to become something greater than human weakness. He showed aptitude, learned the Imperial creed, passed the trials. He should have been unremarkable, destined for an obscure career on a forgotten world. Instead, he discovered a talent that would doom him. Cain could read people. Not psychic, just observant. He saw what someone needed to hear, what would inspire them, what would earn loyalty. He learned to project confidence he didn't feel, speak with authority he didn't possess. His instructors noticed. They marked him for commissarial training. He graduated middle of his class, which suited him perfectly, high enough to avoid terrible postings, low enough to avoid attention. He received his uniform, his weapons, his first assignment. Junior Commissaire with the 12th Valhallan Artillery, a support unit. Rear LAN, perfect. For 3 months, life was everything he wanted. He drilled crews, executed one man for theft to establish authority, enjoyed the safest posting a commissar could hope for. Then the orcs came to Desolatia 4th. The invasion blindsided everyone. Intelligence missed the orc gathering, where the greenskins achieved unusual stealth. Either way, Cain's comfortable artillery positions became front-line defenses as the horde swept forward. The regimental colonel died in the first hour, torn apart by commandos. The major, who should have assumed command, was found gibbering in his tent, broken by stress, a shell-shocked ruin, incapable of coherent thought. Chain of command shattered. Officers shouted contradictory orders. Soldiers looked around for someone to tell them what to do. And there was Cain, in his black uniform, the most visible person on the battlefield, the Commissar. They looked to him. Inside, he was screaming. He wanted to run, to hide, to be anywhere except here with orcs visible on the horizon getting closer every second. But running was impossible. The soldiers watched him. If he broke, they'd break. Fleeing soldiers made excellent targets. At least soldiers in position could shoot back. So he did the only thing his panicking mind suggested. He climbed onto an artillery piece, making himself even more visible, and he shouted. He doesn't remember the exact words. Something about the Emperor, something about duty, something about how Valhallans didn't know how to retreat. The words didn't matter. The tone did. The image of a commissar standing tall while orcs charged. The artillerists remembered their training. They loaded, aimed, fired. The orcs ran directly into a wall of high-explosive shells at point-blank range. Slaughter. The charge broke. The greenskins fell back. The line held. And Ciaphas Cain became a hero. The commendation cited his inspiring leadership against overwhelming odds. Survivors told stories of their commissar standing fearless before the horde, his voice cutting through chaos. Cain received the Medallion Crimson. A general he'd never met pinned it to his chest and called him an example to all commissars. Inside, Cain felt the trap closing. Because now he had a reputation. Now people expected things. Now his next posting wouldn't be safe artillery in the rear. Now he was marked as someone who handled crises. Now he was doomed. His next assignment proved it. Commissar with the 597th Valhalla Regiment. Infantry. Combat arms. A unit with a reputation for being exactly where fighting was hardest. The 597th had been decimated defending Valhalla against Tyranids. Survivors merged with the 296th, another Valhallan unit. The result was soldiers who hated each other, came from different traditions, barely spoke the same dialect. They needed someone to unite them. The commissariat chose Ciaphas Cain, hero of Desolatia 4. When he first saw the 597th, he saw disaster. Former 296 soldiers clustered on one side of the mustering ground, the 597th remnants on the other. They stared at each other with open hostility. Fights broke out daily. The previous commissar had been killed, possibly by his own soldiers. Nobody investigated. Cain stood before 2,000 soldiers ready to tear each other apart, and terror clawed at his guts. But terror taught him to think. These soldiers didn't need another brutal disciplinarian. They needed a reason to work together, something more compelling than fear of execution. They needed to believe they could survive. So he gave them a speech, not about duty or glory or sacrifice, about survival, about how soldiers who trusted each other lived longer, about how a divided regiment was easier to kill than one fighting as one, about how the emperor valued results, and results required unity. It wasn't inspiring in the traditional sense, but it was practical. Soldiers respect practical. More importantly, it acknowledged their fears without calling them cowards. It gave permission to want to live while still demanding they fight. The speech bought time. Now he needed to deliver results. The opportunity came on Perlia, a civilized world with a simple mission: diplomatic presence during trade negotiations. Cain couldn't believe his luck. Diplomacy meant ceremonies, receptions, formal events, far from combat, safe. For 3 days it felt like vacation. Then the Geno-stealers revealed themselves. Part 2. The pattern emerges. Geno-stealers are nightmares made flesh. Alien horrors that infiltrate human populations and corrupt from within. A single Geno-stealer infects an entire world over generations, creating hybrid offspring that look increasingly human while remaining utterly loyal to the alien hive mind. Patient, insidious. By the time their presence is discovered, they've compromised everything. Perlia's cult had infiltrated the planetary governor's family. They were everywhere. And Cain discovered them by accident. He'd been looking for a quiet place to avoid a tedious diplomatic reception, somewhere to hide for a few hours. The palace had extensive catacombs, ancient tunnels predating the current structure, perfect for getting lost. The first body was so unexpected he nearly tripped over it. A servitor, mechanical components torn apart, biological parts showing claw damage. Cain froze. Servitors didn't malfunction violently. Someone destroyed this one. Something destroyed it. He should have reported immediately, should have let others investigate. But returning to the reception meant walking into danger he couldn't see. At least down here, danger was obvious. At least here, he could defend himself. He followed the trail deeper. More bodies. Human this time. Palace servants. Claw marks. Signs of struggle. Then sounds: chittering, clicking, wet noises of something inhuman moving through darkness. He pressed against the wall, making himself small, controlling his breathing, and watched as a Geno-stealer moved past, close enough to touch. A pure strain alien, forearms ending in claws that could gut armor, carapace that reflected no light, a head that was all teeth and hunger. Behind it came hybrids, first and second generation cult offspring, grotesque mixtures of human and alien, moving with unsettling grace. They carried crates marked with Imperial seals, weapons, supplies, staging an uprising. Any sensible commissar would have reported this immediately, would have gathered forces and returned in strength. But Cain's mind did calculations. If the cult was this extensive, this well-supplied, this organized, they'd compromised security at every level. Reporting through normal channels meant reporting to cultists who'd ensure the information never reached anyone who mattered. The safest option was gathering proof that couldn't be ignored and delivering it directly to the highest authority, which meant going deeper, following the Geno-stealers, putting himself in more danger to avoid uncertain danger of compromised command. Cain's life was choices between bad and worse. He got an expert at choosing bad.
And the cult's magus saw him. The Geno-stealer magus was 4th generation, almost human except for the eyes and subtle wrongness of movement. It wore noble robes. It probably had been nobility before corruption. And it looked at Cain with intelligence, recognition, awareness that this intruder had seen too much. Cain ran. Not heroically, not tactically. Pure survival panic through tunnels he barely remembered, with pursuit echoing behind him. Geno-stealers are faster than humans. He should have died there. Then a voice cut through the darkness. "Sir." One word, flat, matter of fact. The most beautiful sound Cain had ever heard. Jurgen stood in the tunnel intersection, melt-a-gun in his filthy hands, his mere presence making Cain's skin crawl in a way that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with a smell that defied description. "Jurgen," Cain gasped, "how did you—" "Thought you might need assistance, sir." The genie-stealer Magus rounded the corner, 4 pursuing pure strains behind it, and all of them recoiled as if struck. The Magus's face twisted. It clutched its head, its psychic coordination with followers disrupted. Enhanced reflexes faltered. Jurgen fired. A melt-a-gun deletes things from reality. Superheated beam that turns matter to vapor and ash. The Magus had time to scream. Then it was gone. Nothing left but scorched stone and the smell of cooked meat mixing with Jurgen's natural odor. The pure strains, suddenly disconnected from psychic coordination, became confused, disorganized. Cain took the opportunity to keep running, Jurgen following with the loyalty that transcended reason. They emerged into a ballroom full of Perlia's nobility, both carrying weapons covered in tunnel grime, reeking of underground and unwashed aid. Cain thought quickly, turned panicked escape into dramatic entrance. He announced the cult's existence, presented evidence, named names of nobles he'd recognized in the chambers, and because he was Commissar Cain, hero of Desolatia 4, people believed him immediately. The purge was brutal and thorough. The 597th deployed throughout the capital, hunting hybrids and cure strains in Underhive and Palace. Cain led strike forces into cult strongholds, places where his soldiers vastly outnumbered the enemy, proving his commitment while maintaining survival odds. The campaign ended with another decoration, the Order of the Aquila, for single-handedly discovering and disrupting a genie-stealer cult. Artists painted him confronting the Magus, bolt pistol raised, the image of fearless authority. The reality was running away screaming while Jurgen saved his life. But this was the pattern. Every attempt at self-preservation transformed into legendary heroism. Every accident became tactical genius. Every survival instinct looked like calculated bravery. The 597th believed in their commissar. Former rivals started working together, united by shared experience. The soldiers who'd been ready to tear each other apart became a single unit, and their commissar became the reason they survived when they should have died. Cain's approach to leadership was born from wanting to keep himself alive. Keep soldiers alive, increase your own survival chances. Avoid unnecessary casualties. Fight smart, not just hard. Position yourself where you're valuable but least likely to die. To the soldiers, this looked like a commissar who valued their lives. To the commissariat, this created exactly the kind of effective regiment they wanted. After Perlia came Gravilax, and if Perlia was complicated, Gravilax was a nightmare wrapped in bureaucracy. The planet was a trade hub, wealthy, civilized, exactly the posting Cain hoped would be safe. It had culture, art, comfortable accommodations, excellent food, perfect for a commissar avoiding combat. The problem was everyone wanted Gravilax. The Tau Empire saw potential expansion. Chaos cultists saw a soft target. The Imperium saw territory to defend. And the planetary government saw opportunity to play all sides for profit. Cain's role should have been simple.
Accompany the diplomatic mission, look impressive, remind everyone the Imperium had military force. Simple, safe, boring in exactly the way he craved. Instead, he found assassination attempts, Tau infiltration, chaos cult scheming, and corruption that made the administratum look efficient. The Tau were least of his problems. Their approach was insidious. Offer better technology, better living standards, everything improved in exchange for accepting the greater good and abandoning the Imperium. For many, it was tempting. Why stay with grinding bureaucracy and endless demands when the Tau promised better? Cain had to admit the Tau made compelling arguments. Superior technology, more efficient society. They didn't execute people for minor heresies, but they didn't understand humanity's capacity for chaos corruption. That blind spot would doom their Gravelax operation. The chaos cult was subtle. They'd infiltrated the criminal underworld, offering power and pleasure to those willing to embrace forbidden knowledge. Slowly, carefully, they built a network reaching into government, trade guilds, and even the Adeptus Arbites. Cain discovered this investigating what he thought was simple smuggling, low-level crime that commissars sometimes handled. Looking for evidence to hand over to the Arbites, making himself look diligent while avoiding danger. Instead, he found a chaos shrine beneath the warehouse. 8 pointed stars, sacrificial altars, evidence of demonic worship. Any sensible person would have called backup immediately. But Cain knew the appropriate authorities were probably compromised. The cult had been too successful for it to operate without protection. So he did what he always did, found a way to expose the cult while minimizing personal risk. This led to the most terrifying night of his career, infiltrating a cult gathering disguised as a potential recruit. Watching planetary officials and wealthy merchants participate in rituals that should have them executed. Watching them summon minor daemons. Watching them pledge to ruinous powers. Watching them plan Gravelax's corruption from inside. Then they noticed him. One cultist, more perceptive than others, realized he didn't belong. Cover blown. Surrounded by chaos worshippers in a warehouse district with no backup, no escape. This was it. This was where his luck finally ran out. Jurgen appeared. Of course he did. He always did. The blank's presence disrupted summoned daemons, causing them to dissipate back into the warp. Cultists suddenly lost supernatural support. Soft nobles and merchants facing a commissar with bolt pistol and an aide with melt gun. It wasn't even fair. The purge that followed was extensive. Cain had authority to arrest half the government. The Inquisition validated his actions, commended his dedication to rooting out heresy. The Tau, seeing chaos, corruption, and realizing their vulnerability, withdrew. The Imperium maintained control. Cain received the Macarian Cross. The pattern continued across dozens of worlds. Nusquam fundamentibus turned into three-way war between Imperial forces, orcs, and awakening Necrons. Cain's solution was born from survival. Manipulate orcs and Necrons into fighting each other while Imperial forces evacuated. Tacticians called it brilliant. Cain remembered thinking it was the only way everyone wouldn't die. Through it all, Jurgen remained constant. The aid others avoided became Cain's lifeline. Jurgen anticipated needs before Cain recognized them, appeared with hot recaf when exhausted, fresh ammunition when supplies ran low, exact solutions to whatever crisis emerged. The man was uncanny. More than that, Jurgen was a blank, a human null whose presence dampened psychic phenomena. In a galaxy where daemons could possess the unwary and psychers could boil your brain with thought, having Jurgen nearby was armor against threats most couldn't see. Cain never asked how Jurgen always found him. He was afraid the answer would be, "I follow your terrified breathing, sir." Instead, he accepted his aide's presence as constant. Jurgen was the one person who saw Cain at his worst, most frightened, most honest, and never judged. The relationship between them transcended normal officer-aide dynamics. They'd saved each other countless times in different ways. Jurgen kept Cain alive through loyalty and melt-gun fire. Cain kept Jurgen alive by being the only officer who valued his capabilities more than minded his smell. With Jurgen, Cain could be tired, frightened, uncertain. No pretense, no performance, no heroic facade. And Jurgen would brew recaf, clean weapons, prepare for the next crisis with calm acceptance. It was the most important friendship of Cain's life, even though they rarely spoke beyond tactical necessities. Part 3. The Legend That Wouldn't Die. As decades accumulated, Cain became an institution. New commissars studied his campaigns. Regiments requested him specifically. Planetary governors wanted the hero of the Imperium present for defense. He was no longer just a commissar, he was a symbol. And symbols can't hide in the rear with supply trains. The awards kept coming despite his efforts. The Star of Terra, the Honorifica Imperialis, the Aquila Adamantium. Each ceremony meant standing while accepting praise, internally screaming. He developed a standard speech that hit every note: humility, dedication to the emperor, credit to troops, promise to continue serving. He could deliver it half asleep. His memoirs grew into volumes. He wrote honestly, admitting fears, self-serving motivations, accidental heroism. They were meant as testament to history, proof he wasn't the hero everyone claimed, never meant for publication. His truth preserved for theoretical future historians who'd understand Ciaphas Cain, hero of the Imperium, was really just a lucky coward. When portions were discovered and published, they had opposite effect. Readers saw humility and self-awareness, a hero who remained grounded despite achievements, who could admit fear while doing duty. His attempts to expose himself as fraud only made his legend more powerful. He became not just hero, but relatable hero. Someone who struggled with the same fears as ordinary soldiers, but overcame them through determination. It was the ultimate irony. Cain couldn't escape heroism, even explicitly explaining in writing that he wasn't one. The Imperium hated heroes so desperately it would create them from anyone who survived long enough. The later years brought different challenges. His reputation preceded him everywhere. When Commissar Cain was assigned, it meant the situation was serious. It meant the commissariat believed their legendary officer could make a difference. It meant expectations were impossibly high. And it meant his attempts to find quiet postings were futile because everyone wanted the hero where fighting was fiercest. He developed strategies for managing this, cultivated relationships with logistics officers who could explain why the commissar needed to inspect supply lines far from the front, emphasized morale visits to rear echelon units, volunteered for diplomatic missions that sounded safe, even though his track record suggested nothing involving Cain stayed safe. But the galaxy had a pattern now. Every supposedly safe assignment turned dangerous. Every diplomatic mission uncovered hidden threats. Every quiet posting became crucial battleground. Like the universe conspired to force him into heroism.
One campaign stands out in his memory, though Cain would rather forget it. Meeting Commissar Yerrick. Yerrick was everything a commissar should be, genuinely fearless, tactically brilliant, physically imposing. The legendary orc killer who stared down war bosses and made greenskins believe his eyes could kill. Standing next to him made Cain feel like fraud. But Yerrick treated him as a peer, even with admiration. "Cain," Yerrick said, his bionic eye whirring as it focused, "I've read your reports. Your approach to leadership is unconventional." "Thank you, sir." Cain kept his voice steady. "That wasn't necessarily praise," Yerrick snarled. "Almost. You avoid unnecessary casualties. You prioritize soldiers' survival over glorious sacrifice. Some would call that soft." Cain felt sweat under his collar. "I find live soldiers more useful than dead heroes, sir." "Precisely," Yerrick nodded. "Which is why your regiment has the highest mission success rate and lowest casualty percentage in the sector. You understand something most commissars don't. Dead heroes can't win wars. Only survivors win." Cain wanted to explain he just didn't want to die. That every decision was self-serving, that there was no grand philosophy. Instead, he said, "I serve the Emperor, sir." "Don't we all?" Yerrick's eyes studied him. "But you serve him by keeping his soldiers alive to fight another day. There's wisdom in that, even if you stumbled onto it accidentally." How did Yerrick know? How could he see through the facade? Cain spent that entire conversation waiting to be exposed. It never happened. Yerrick genuinely respected him, saw him as peer, and somehow that was worse than being discovered, because it meant even Yerrick, the paragon of commissarial virtue, couldn't see the truth. The conflicts with Chaos forces were always worst. Orcs you could understand. They wanted to fight. Tyranids were simple hunger. Even Tal had comprehensible philosophy. But Chaos corruption was insidious, personal, designed to exploit every weakness. For someone constantly afraid, constantly looking for survival over glory, Chaos whispers must have been tempting. Not that Cain would admit it. But his cowardice might have been strength against corruption. Chaos offers power, glory, absence of fear. Cain didn't want power or glory. He wanted to survive. His self-serving nature, constant fear, lack of grand ambitions made him difficult target for temptation. You can't offer someone everything when what they desire is just not dying horribly. It was the most backhanded purity imaginable, but it worked. Jurgen's presence helped. The null field meant daemons couldn't manifest nearby, Chaos psychers couldn't affect him, and even subtle corruption Chaos exuded couldn't quite reach those in immediate vicinity. They'd saved each other countless times in different ways. As decades passed, Cain aged, hair grayed, joints ached after campaigns. He relied more on experience and cunning, less on physical capability. But even this worked in his favor. Veterans spoke of his wisdom, his tactical acumen, his ability to win through intelligence rather than force. What they saw as wisdom, Cain knew as refined cowardice. Accumulated lessons from 1,000 near-death experiences, teaching him to avoid the 1,001st. Eventually, he earned what he'd always wanted, teaching position at a Schola Progenium. Respect, authority, and absolutely no chance of being shot at. He accepted with genuine relief, thinking his days of accidental heroism were over. He should have known better. The Schola itself came under attack. Gene stealers, of course. The aging commissar who wanted to teach tactics found himself defending students against alien horrors, organizing evacuation, turning educational institution into fortress. And once again, survival instinct, tactical thinking, desperate need to not die, saved lives and added another chapter to his legend. The final irony of Ciaphas Cain is he never stopped being afraid, never overcame his fundamental nature, never became the fearless hero everyone believed. He remained, until the end, a man desperately trying to survive in a galaxy designed to kill him. The difference between Cain and actual cowards wasn't that he lacked fear. It was that his fear made him smart, made him careful, made him think through consequences rather than freezing or fleeing. His cowardice, properly applied, looked indistinguishable from wisdom. And perhaps that's the real lesson. Perhaps heroism isn't absence of fear. Perhaps it's being terrified and doing what needs doing anyway because leaving would get you killed faster. It's doing the right thing, not because it's right, but because it's the least bad option. It's surviving through intelligence, luck, and help from a loyal aide with terrible hygiene. The Imperium needed a hero. It got Ciaphas Cain. He never wanted the role, never asked for responsibility, never felt worthy of accolades, but he played the part anyway because not playing would have been more dangerous.
And in playing the part, in wearing the mask of heroism while terror churned in his guts, he became exactly what the Imperium needed. Proof that even ordinary humans, frightened and flawed, could stand against the darkness. Commissar Ciaphas Cain stands as one of the most celebrated figures in Imperial history, bearer of more medals than he had uniform space to display, friend to regiments and terror to enemies. The accidental hero who saved the Imperium by trying desperately to save himself. Behind the legend is a man who knows the truth, who spent his career trying to survive, who stumbled into greatness while running from danger, who became hero by trying desperately to be anything but. But here's what Cain finally understood in those quiet moments between crises. It doesn't matter whether motivation was survival or nobility. Doesn't matter whether he acted from cowardice or courage. What matters is he acted. He stood when others fell. He fought when flight seemed safer. He led when leadership was needed. The why is irrelevant to soldiers who survived because of his decisions, to worlds saved by his presence, to enemies defeated by his tactics. Ciaphas Cain never wanted to be a hero. He became one anyway through simple act of refusing to die, despite a galaxy that seemed determined to kill him. And the Imperium, in its grinding, brutal way, is better for it. Even if the hero himself never quite believes it, even if he spends every moment waiting for someone to realize he's a fraud, even if, after decades of legendary service, he's still just trying to survive one more day in the grim darkness of the far future. The Emperor protects, they say, but in Ciaphas Cain's case, it was fear that protected him. Fear, intelligence, luck, and one loyal aide who never questioned, never judged, and always showed up at exactly the right moment with a melter-gun and terrible body odor. That's the truth behind the legend. That's the reality beneath the myth. That's Commissar Ciaphas Cain, the accidental hero, the man who saved the Imperium by being too afraid to do anything else.